So today we're going to talk about some instruction that you can use to support linguistic and social competence in very early beginning communicators. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the difference between choice making and requesting. Now, although they sound similar and they are similar skills, choice making and requesting are actually different. Choice making is when 2 items or 3 items or 4 or 10 or however many are presented to the item and somebody says, which one do you want? Make a choice. Requesting actually requires initiation. So requesting is when the AAC user says, excuse me, can I please have a, or whatever their language and vocabulary is going to be. So requesting is a much harder skill because that initiation piece initially takes a lot of work to teach. So just be aware of that. When you're teaching elicited choice making is, again, an easier skill than requesting, so that's typically the one you're going to start with. You're going to start with 2 preferred items because the goal at this point is just to teach the individual that communication has power. So you want them to understand that if they use these symbols, whatever symbols you're using, to communicate, then they're going to get something rewarding and meaningful. So you're going to start with 2 preferred items. To figure out what the preferred items are going to be, you're going to talk to family members and friends and teachers and people who know the individual really well and say, what does this person enjoy doing? And then take those 2 things, develop your symbols. If the individual doesn't yet have picture-object representation, so you're not using pictures, then you're going to start by just having them choose between the actual items, the objects themselves. Remember your hierarchy of easiest to hardest for symbols, real objects, and then and so on down that hierarchy. So you can use actual objects for this. Once the person figures out how to successfully choose between 2 preferred items, you're going to introduce a non-preferred item, so something that they don't necessarily love or enjoy. I tend to use a sock a lot. Most kiddos don't really like socks that much, or like a plastic toy fish, or just anything that's not super motivating. You don't want to use something that they don't like necessarily, just something that's not super motivating, something they don't really care about. So you'll move to 1 preferred item and 1 non-preferred item. And then as the individual begins to master that, you're going to move to increase the number of choices in the selection set. So you could do 2 preferreds and 1 non-preferred, or 2 and 2 for preferred and non-preferred. Just increase your size. One thing I want you to be thinking about is think about the location of your symbols. So unless you're using LAMP, which is the language acquisition through motor planning, unless you're specifically teaching the motor plan, make sure that you're moving around your symbol selections, because otherwise the individual might just start to hit that one button or select that one picture all the time and not really truly be even looking at the symbol to know what it is. They're just learning, if I hit this side, then that's what I get. So when you move to the point where you're at preferred and non-preferred, switch up the location of your symbols to make sure the individual is really truly looking at the symbol and making a meaningful selection and not just hitting that one space all the time. Some instructional techniques that you can use when teaching choice making. The first one is natural consequences. So once you get to that preferred, non-preferred step, even if the individual chooses the item that you know they don't want, give it to them anyway. That's an example of natural consequences. Another example of natural consequences outside of speech-language pathology would be when my daughter, it's freezing outside and my daughter doesn't want to wear a coat, and I tell her, okay, but if you don't wear a coat, you're going to be cold, and she still refuses to wear a coat, then I let her be cold. Obviously, I don't do that in the extreme cold weather, but if it's just a little chilly outside, then yeah, she's going to be a little bit cold. That's a choice she made. She didn't listen to me. That's a natural consequence of her behavior. So the same thing with the choice making. If they choose something they don't want, you're going to give it to them anyway. And then say, oh, look, you chose the sock. Here's your sock. You can have it, and give it to them and let them manipulate it. And likely they're going to drop it or be done with it very quickly, and then present the 2 choices again. But natural consequences is also going to teach that individual that their communication has power. Whatever they say or do or choose with their symbol set is what they're going to get. You need to make sure that they understand that what they're doing has power. Modeling is also another one that, of course, you can use all the time. You can, which one do you want to play with? Wait and pause, and if you don't see any reaction, then you model it for them. I want to play with the bubbles. I'm going to choose bubbles. Then you touch whatever your symbol set for bubbles may be, take the bubbles, play with them for a few minutes, put it back, and start the routine again. Ask the individual, which one would you like? What do you want? Pause and wait and see, and model that way. Explicit instruction is another great strategy to use. You can tell them right now, we're going to practice choice making. I'm going to give you 2 choices. You tell me which one you want, and you'll get it, and walk through it and model it and explain every step, whatnot. All of these are kind of an example of explicit instruction. Also be aware of your hierarchy of cueing when you're doing this. Obviously, the independent is what we're hoping for, that the individual will just choose an item and then enjoy it and play with it and manipulate it or eat it or whatever your choice may be, and then go back to the beginning. So independent would be on their own without any help. A visual cue would be maybe if you just pointed to the symbol set that you're offering them. So they just need you, or even if you just look down at the symbol set that they're choosing from, then they're watching you and they're seeing your point or your eye gaze. You don't have to use any words, but just your visual field going there reminds them that they're supposed to be making a choice. A verbal cue would be after you've already said which one do you want, then you can give another verbal cue. You choose now, your turn, pick one, type of thing. A physical prompt would be if you maybe tapped their elbow, if they're using direct selection, obviously. Give their elbow a little tap or a little nudge to get them going. Sometimes kids or individuals who are emerging communicators just need that little bump to get them started. And then hand over hand obviously would be if they're not participating at all, then you take their hand over their hand gently and make a choice for them, give them the object, play with them hand over hand if you need to that way. Always start independent, work your way down the hierarchy, and then obviously you want to try to fade out those cues as quickly as possible so that your learner doesn't become dependent upon your cues. So you also need to teach an attention-getting signal. I'm sorry, I'm jumping from choice making to requesting now. So when you're teaching requesting, again, remember the key to requesting is that the individual is initiating the choice in that situation. So you need to teach an attention-getting signal. They need to have a symbol that says that they can choose that says, excuse me, or I have something to say, or listen to me, please, if you're using a speech output device. Or you can teach them a tap on the shoulder. You can teach them the sign for look. You can teach them to wave at somebody. Anything that would be an appropriate way to get somebody's attention. Obviously, screaming, hitting, things like that are not appropriate attention-getting signals. Typically, a tap on the shoulder or a wave or a programmed button in the device. Or teach them how to find in the device. I have something to say, or whatever your catchphrase is going to be. But make sure you teach them how to initiate. And you can go through a lot of role playing when you're teaching that how to initiate piece. You can teach them how to do it and then say, okay, now we're going to practice. I'm going to be busy over here. You need to get my attention, and then ignore the individual for a few minutes and see if they will independently use it. If they're not at that point yet, then you might have to try to find somebody else that can help you, and then practice with the individual getting that person's attention so they can watch you do it with whatever their symbol set is, and then they can practice it and you can do it together. The Picture Exchange Communication System, or PECS, is commonly used for teaching requesting, and it works pretty well for most individuals who have picture-object representation, obviously. It is a formal training that you need to go through to get certified if you're going to truly be doing PECS. But there are modified versions of PECS which are used pretty often. So a lot of times kids will have PECS books that have a whole bunch of different board maker symbols or real pictures in them, whatever the individual is using in their wherever the symbol set they're at that point. And then you can have them hand you the picture symbol for whatever they want or requesting at that time. Once they master that, then you can start building linguistic complexity to it, and you can teach them the pronouns and the requesting words and then have the symbols, and so they're going to take the pronouns. If their choices are I, he, and she over there, they're going to take the I put it down into the bottom where you have a Velcro on the bottom to make a sentence strip. I, then want, need, don't want, have choices like that. They'll choose whatever want. They'll put the want down on the symbols on the sentence strip on the bottom, and then all the choices, cookies, blocks, bubbles, ball, whatever they're going to choose, they're going to take it down and put it on, and then they'll hand you the sentence strip that now says, I want the ball. So you can take this from very simplistic and easy, one word, hand you one object, to building linguistic complexity and having your individual make entire sentences. So when we also need to be aware to teach individuals who are beginning communicators to reject or to say no or I'm all done. So many times we forget that typical kids who are learning language, my 2.5-year-old does this all the time. Well, when she's all done or bored with something, she tells me, I'm done, I don't want any more. Sometimes she does that appropriately, sometimes she throws a fit. Well, typically kids who are learning to use AAC, they don't have that appropriate way to say, I'm all done, I don't want to do this anymore, I need a break, I'm bored. And so then you'll see those fits a lot more often, the crying, the screaming, the closing the eyes, the hitting, the biting, those problem behaviors. And we do not want to encourage that. We want to teach other more appropriate ways for them to reject. So you want to start by teaching a no symbol. The listener or you or the family or whoever you're working with has to interpret what the individual is rejecting. Sometimes that's pretty black and white. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to figure out, but you're going to have to learn that individual and figure out what their current signal for rejecting is. For people who have a lot of physical disabilities and are unable to really throw a true fit, they might just close their eyes, or they might just start ignoring you or not respond to you at all anymore, and that might be their no signal. So when you're going to teach a rejecting, it's important to work with the family on this and figure out what they want the rejecting symbol to be for the individual, because they're the ones who are going to have to be using it all the time. So your first step is going to be to figure out what the no symbol is going to be. Then you're going to identify some non-preferred activities or items. Again, you don't want to use something aversive. You don't want to do something that's going to make the individual angry or that you know they don't like. You're just going to choose something you know they don't prefer. Again, the sock. It's not going to make somebody angry to see a sock, but it's not exciting and fun and motivating to them. But you don't want to do things that are going to intentionally irritate the individual. So just remember, non-preferred does not mean doesn't like. So anyways, you're going to choose a non-preferred activity or item or something they don't love to do. You're going to establish the appropriate rejection symbol. You have to teach that to them first. Remember to make it be anything appropriate. So if they're going to do the sign for all done, that's fine. If they're going to do the sign for no, that's fine. For sign language for no, that's fine. You can have a button programmed onto your speech generating device that says I'm all done. You can have a picture symbol that means need a break. You can have the individual shut their eyes if that's an appropriate one and the family is okay with that, that's fine too. Choose any appropriate rejection symbol. It has to be easy for the individual to access. It can't be buried on the third layer of vocabulary in their device. It needs to be right there all the time, always accessible. Because when somebody is irritated and done, you want them to be able to tell you that before they get to the point where they're overwhelmingly done. So choose what your symbol is going to be, make sure it's easy to access, and then provide opportunities to reject. Provide various opportunities to reject. So again, present that non-preferred item. They'll say no thank you, or I'm all done, or I don't want it, or whatever, and that's fine. But a different opportunity to reject is if they're doing something they do enjoy for a really long time, eventually they're going to get sick of it and they're going to want to be done. Do that too. Play bubbles until you are all blue in the face. And then have them say, and then when you can tell they're not interested anymore, you can do some of those cues. You can, if they're not independently requesting to be all done, you can point to the all done symbol, whatever it is. That's your visual cue. If they're still not doing it, you can say, if you're all done with this activity, you can tell me, push your button, or whatever you're doing. If they're still not doing it, you can do the move down the hierarchy to teach them. In the beginning, it is important to honor their rejecting symbol every single time. It's not a something you're going to continue to do, but in the beginning you have to honor it every single time so that they learn that their communication has power.